Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alicia and today I'm doing my October and November wrap up. The end of October and the beginning of November got a little bit hectic around my house, so I didn't end up doing an October wrap up. And now that November has ended and I'm doing my November wrap up, I thought it would be a good time to throw in what I read in November as well, talk about it in this video. Also, this is kind of for Shelly because Shelly said that she would like to see a super late October wrap up. So here you go. Here's my super late October wrap up that I'm also combining with my November wrap up. So the first book I read in November was Velvet Was the Night by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I gave this book 5 stars. Clearly I enjoyed it, and there are definitely things I remember about it. One thing, now that I'm looking back on it though, and maybe one benefit of doing an October wrap-up so late, is I can look back and realize, I love Silvia Moreno-Garcia's writing. I've enjoyed all of the books she has written that I've read. I haven't read all of her books, but everything I've read by her I've enjoyed. Was it a 5-star read? I gave it 5 stars. I love it. I really enjoyed it. But I'm starting to forget things about it, and I did compare it to some of my other more recent reads that I've enjoyed more that I also gave 5 stars, and I'm wondering if a 5-star was actually the right call for this one. I put it through my Cowles system, so I gave it a rating on character and atmosphere and writing and all of those things, and it kind of came out with this 5-star. I would say it's probably more like a 4.75 if I'm going with based on how my heart feels. So the issue with waiting so long between reading it and doing this wrap up is I don't really remember how to tell you what it's about. We follow this main character whose name I've honestly forgotten at this point, who is living her life, doesn't really like her career, and gets wrapped up in this mystery of what happened to her neighbor. Her neighbor comes and asks her to watch her cat while the neighbor is gone. The main character says yes. And the neighbor's only supposed to be gone for a few days, but she's gone for longer. The main character wants her money for agreeing to watch this cat and is trying to track down her neighbor, and she gets sucked into this whole thing with crime and revolution and things like this. And it is a really good book. And there are some things that I remember really well, but I've also forgotten a lot of it, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I enjoyed it while I read it. And there's no need to remember everything from every single book you read. That's an unrealistic expectation to have. This book was really good. I love Silvia Moreno-Garcia's writing. I feel like I said that earlier, but I'm saying it again. I thought this book was incredibly well crafted. And like I said, I gave it 5 stars. So definitely a good read. Next, I read 2 books of poetry, which are The Princess Saves Herself in this one and The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one, both by Amanda Lovelace. I did not actually read these back to back, but I'm going to talk about them at the same time because they are both part of the same trilogy, which is the Women Are Some Kind of Magic poetry trilogy. I have loved both of these. I'm not going to say too much about them. They focus a lot on hard, traumatic topics, and if you've had some of the same types of trauma that the author has had, then they're very relatable. Both of them made me cry. And I think I gave both of these 5 stars. Even though I feel like a rating isn't really necessary, and it's not really something I could put through the Cowles system, but I definitely did love both of these. Next, I reread The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is Erin Morgenstern's second book. She is, I think, my favorite author of all time. This book follows Zachary Ezra Rollins, who is studying to be a game theorist, a video game theorist or something like that. He's a grad student, and when he was younger, he saw this door where there shouldn't have been a door. It was like a brick wall and there was a door on it and he didn't go through. One day, as he's in the library, about to start another semester of grad school, he finds a book that talks about that moment that he didn't go through the door. And then we follow as he tries to figure out information about this book. And we find out, and he gets to go to the place that he would have gone to if he had gone through the door in the first place. I love this book. Like I said, it was a reread for me. I think I mentioned this in one of my recent reading vlogs. Maybe my fall break reading vlog, which I mean is honestly not that recent. But I think I talk about it in there. And I did have some issues with it because I had a harder time understanding what was happening on my second time reading it than I did on the first time. I don't think that has anything to do with Erin Morgenstern's writing style or the book. I think it just has to do with the headspace I was in when I reread it. That being said, I still love this book. I didn't give it a star rating on my second read around because by the time I finished it, I was kind of in a weird space and I did not have the emotional energy to put it through the compile system. My gut is to give it 5 stars, and I think it probably deserves that rating, but I haven't put it through and like really analyzed it yet. Still, one of my favorite authors of all time. One of the best books I've ever read. Next, I read Over the Woodward Wall and Along the Saltwise Sea, both by A. Deborah Baker. I did read these back to back. A. Deborah Baker is a pen name for Seanan McGuire. In Seanan McGuire's book, Middle Game, she references a children's series that exists in that world. These are the first 2 books in that children's series. So Over the Woodward Wall is the first one, and Along the Saltwise Sea actually just came out in October. So I reread Over the Woodward Wall and read Along the Saltwise Sea for the first time. And these are fun. Basically, in the first one, you follow Zib and Avery, as they're 2 very different children. They live on the same street, but they've never met. They go to different schools because the school district line is like right smack dab in between their houses, even though they just live a couple houses away from each other. And in the first one, they are both walking to school. They both take a detour and they end up climbing over a wall and basically going to a different world. And it's really fun. We follow their adventures in, I think it's called the Up and Under, and as they are trying to figure out the rules of this place and also how to get home. I don't know how many books there are going to be in the series. There's only the first 2 are out right now, and they are really just kind of fun. I honestly almost love the idea of writing a spin-off of these children's books that are mentioned and just going with it. I just think that's a fun idea and like expands the world of Middle Game a little bit. So I love that. Next, I read The Witch King by H.E. Edgmon. This was so much better than I thought it was going to be. In this, we follow Wyatt, who is a young trans witch who ran away from the Fae Kingdom, even though he was fated and like mated to the Fae prince. And then the prince comes and finds him and basically is like, you have to come back or I'm going to invoke this blood curse and I'm going to kill you. And this book was so much better than I thought it was going to be. It's the first time I've ever read anything Fae related, but it was so good. And like the world building was really great. Also, I don't know if the Fae lore in this is similar to all of the Fae lore that we have, but I really enjoyed learning about the Fae. Also, how the Fae treat the witches was a really interesting and just like very real dynamic, because basically the Fae have all the power, and a witch is someone who is born to Fae parents but isn't a Fae. They still have their own type of magic, but they don't have wings and they don't have the same type of magic, and they are treated like second-class citizens. And reading about it was a very interesting story, and also very appropriate for some of the discussions that this book wanted to have. This story, though, was really good. And I think I've talked about this before with some of the other books I've read, where it felt like the author was trying to send a message, and in some books, the message overtakes the story. That is not at all what happened in this book. The story was really good. I was really rooting for who I was supposed to be rooting for, and honestly, H.E. Edgmon just wrote a really, really good story. And I was a little bit surprised, but pleasantly so. I thought I would find this book okay, but I actually ended up really enjoying this read. And I believe it's the first in the series, so I'm definitely looking forward to reading other books in this series once they come out. Next, I reread 3 volumes of Moonstruck. I think these are the only 3 volumes that are out right now. I read the first one in October and the second 2 in November. I'm just going to talk about them all at once, though, because they're all part of the same story. I just kind of interspersed these, and I read them. Basically what I did is I finished The Witch King. I read the first one. I read the next book. I read the second one. And then, between each chapter long book that I picked up, I read a graphic novel until, I was done with the 3. This is a really cute story that follows a magical town, and it's queer, and it's heartwarming and cute, and honestly very appropriate, I felt like, for this season, because it's magical, and there's vampires and shapeshifters and werewolves and centaurs and all sorts of fun creatures, and I just love it a lot. Now I'm going to get into my November reads. The graphic novel Moonstruck Volume 1 was the last thing I finished in October, and the first book that I read in November was The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. I'm pretty sure I heard about this from Mason in the Dark, and if I remember right, he really enjoyed it. It's been a couple months since that video, but this book was really good. This is a mystery thriller book that is just on point with the mystery thriller vibes and with just the mystery in general and trying to figure out what's happening. And I loved it. It's dual timeline. I'm trying to remember. I feel so there are 2 timelines. Let me back up. There are 2 timelines. I feel like there's more time spent in one of the timelines than the other, but that could just be how I'm remembering it. Basically, we have a 2017 timeline and then a 1989 timeline. And in the 2017 timeline, it's a girl whose aunt went missing in the 1989 timeline. In the 2017 timeline, she's trying to figure out what happened to her aunt. And in the 1989 timeline, we start the book with the lead up to this girl going to work and going to her job at the Sundown Motel where she works nights the night she disappeared. But it's not one of those stories where they tell you what happened at the beginning and then you're trying to put together the pieces of how it happened. It's they lead you up to her getting to work, and then you skip and you learn in the next chapter you know, like the premise of the book is she went missing that night, that lead up of you hear this lead up of her going to work, and then the next chapter you find out that night she went missing when you're in the 2017 timeline. And her niece, who she never met, goes to this town, ends up getting a job at the same place, working the same shift, and is trying to figure out what happened to her aunt. And this book was so good. Also, the audiobook just, like, was really good. I was so into it. And I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. Next, I read The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Córdova. This is a book about magic and about family, and it follows as the Montoya family, everyone in the Montoya family gets an invitation to go back to see Orquídea one last time before she dies. And when they get there, she turns into a tree. And like I said, this book is about magic and family secrets. And this is another book that has some dual timeline stuff happening, and it was really well done. I have mentioned this book in like my 2 most recent videos, so I'm not going to talk about it too much here. I'm just going to say it was really good. It gave me very heavy Silvia Moreno-Garcia vibes. There is some weird stuff that happens, but like good weird stuff. Like, I really enjoyed it. I was like, okay, we went there, and I like it, even though it's weird. And I gave this book 5 stars. Next, I read The Algebraist by Iain M. Banks. This is a book that has been sitting on my shelf literally forever. Okay, not literally, but 4 years. And I finally got around to it, and I'm glad I did. This book, however, starts so slow. And the first 120 pages is just kind of unnecessary buildup. So the back of this book talks about the seer Fasintak, and the synopsis on the back says, seconded to a military religious order he's barely heard of, part of the Baroque hierarchy of the Mekatoria, the latest galactic hegemony, Fasantak has to travel again amongst the dwellers. He's in search of a secret hidden for 500 million years. So that's what the back of the book says. That does not start being relevant until like 120 pages into the book. The first 120 pages of this are just skipping between different perspectives and different timelines without any warning, without any, like, the only thing to let you know that you're skipping timelines, which it took me a while to catch on, is just a dot in the middle of the page. You read this part from one character, you get a dot in the middle of the page, you're with a completely different character, potentially in a completely different timeline. Like, really, I was so confused. Because, like, most POV switches, most timeline switches, they establish it, and a lot of them will put, like, the name of the person whose POV it is at the top, like, right before you get into it. This doesn't do this. It was confusing and slow, and I honestly almost DNF'd this so many times. I'm glad I didn't. The end of this really picked up. There was some stuff I didn't love about it. Like, there's this part, there's multiple parts in here that feel very male gazy, and specifically one part where there's like this whole paragraph about how this guy doesn't like meetings, so to entertain himself during meetings he just imagines every woman in the room naked and just like thinks about having sex with them. I'm like, ew. But where this book really shines is the aliens. The aliens in this book were really fascinating, and some of the worlds were really fascinating. So the story is pretty slow. Honestly, nothing much happens for the first, like, almost first full half of this book. You're not doing much. But the aliens and the worlds are pretty cool, and I'm glad I didn't DNF it, because I'm glad I read about the aliens, and even the story got interesting at the end. So all in all, I ended up giving this book 3 stars. It was there was some really good stuff, there was some really bad stuff, and it ended up just falling straight down the middle. Next, I read Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, and this book is perfection, potentially. It may be a perfect book. The characters were incredibly well done. The setting is incredibly well done. The writing is, like, so captivating. I loved this book so much. I'm a little bit sad I haven't read it earlier. Like, I didn't read it before. But I've read it now, and honestly, it is one of the best books I've read this year. This is a book that has a lot happening in it, and there's a lot of POV shifts, and there's some time skips, both things I love. And I'm just gonna read the back because I don't trust myself to talk about this book without giving potential spoilers, just because there's so much happening. So the back says, inspired by the civilizations of pre-Columbian Americas, woven into a tale of celestial prophecies, forbidden magic, and crafted with unforgettable characters, Rebecca Roanhorse has created an epic fantasy adventure in the most original series debut of the decade. In the holy city of Tova, 3 lives are converging during a solar eclipse, prescribed by the sun priest as an unbalancing of the world. Meanwhile, a ship launches from a distant city bound for Tova and set to arrive on the solstice. The captain of the ship, Ziala, is a disgraced teak whose song can calm the waters around her as easily as it can warp a man's mind. Her ship carries 1 passenger. Described as harmless, the passenger Serapio is a young man, blind, scarred, and cloaked in destiny. As Cialo well knows, when a man is described as harmless, he usually ends up being a villain. This book is just really good, okay? I don't know what else to say besides, like, the characters are so good. They each feel so real. They each have their own voice. The setting is amazing. And honestly, Rebecca Roanhorse's writing was just spotless. This is one of the books that I read and I was like, I don't think I could point to something I disliked in this book if I tried. Like, in theory, this should be my favorite book of the year because I don't have any flaws with it. I can't think of anything I disliked about this book. Spoiler, I don't think it's going to unseat Becky Chambers, just because Becky Chambers, I think, hits me a little bit more emotionally. But this book is definitely up there and is practically perfect. Like I said, I can't think of anything I disliked in this book, and I definitely gave this one 5 stars. Next, I read The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. This is a middle grade series, or this is a middle grade story, not a series. This is a middle grade story about a town that once a year they put a child out into the woods because the witch in the woods demands a sacrifice. And it's a story about a witch in the woods who is very confused about why once a year this town leaves a child in the woods to die. This is a middle grade story I've heard a lot about. I've heard a lot of good things about this. And it is a good book. It didn't do anything spectacular for me, which, I mean, is fine it's fine for middle grade. But I was expecting more because of how much I've heard about this book And because of the hype, there was so much hype around this book, and it just didn't live up to it. It was good. I found the writing, the storytelling to be a little bit lacking. I didn't really connect with any of the characters except for one whose name I don't remember right now. This book is multi-perspective, which I love. I love multi-perspective stories. And like, it's a fun read. The concept is really interesting. This, as I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the message of the story overwhelming the story, this feels like it might have been trying to send a message, and maybe that message overwhelmed the story a little bit. The story was still entertaining. I mean, I finished the book, but it wasn't like, it was pretty middle of the road just because it didn't really do anything that wowed me. It also didn't do anything I absolutely hated. So I ended up giving this book a 3-star rating because it is very middle of the road. The last book that I finished in November was 400 Souls, edited by Ibram x Kendi and Keisha and Blaine. This book took me a long time to finish. I read it pretty slowly. I was annotating it, and I also just read a couple stories a day. This is a community history of African America from 1619 to 2019. I'm not going to say too much about this book. It's a heavy read. It is one I would recommend to anyone living in the United States, especially if you're white. Learn more about the history of African America, and honestly learn about how not much has changed. We are doing a lot of the same things, just in different packaging. That was everything I read in October and November. Let me know what you have been reading recently. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!